everyone. Welcome to the Krish Hope webinar series funded by Red Cross. As you know, Krish Hope is a non-profit organization committed to supporting differently abled population in order to build a stronger community. And for more information about Krish Hope, I would invite you to visit www.krishhope.com. And today it's my honor to introduce you all to Neeta Malik in our series of webinar where she's going to discuss about managing diabetes. Neeta is a certified dietitian and she's a certified diabetes educator as well. She's got over 10 years of experience in patient care, individual counseling and group education. And she works with William Osler Health Systems. Today, Neeta is going to actually talk to us about nutritional management of diabetes. Neeta is going to give us some tips about what would be some good food habits to develop in order to manage diabetes. And let's talk to Neeta. Hi Neeta, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Hello, everybody. So we're going to get right into it. As Sonia said, we'll be talking a lot about managing diabetes, especially during this tough times of COVID. So I have an agenda planned already, so let's get right into it.
Exactly, let's get started.
Okay, so the topics for discussion today and the agenda would be that we'll be talking about guidelines for healthy eating, guidelines for healthy cooking. There will be discussion on how to manage your blood sugars, whether you are on diabetes medication or on insulin. We'll go a little bit more deeper into understanding the role of carbohydrates, fat, protein in good health, because these are some of the major contributors.
That's true.
For nutritional management.
And especially Neeta, in today's time, in COVID times, when a lot of activities are not there, which usually we used to do.
Absolutely.
And staying home, usually we do indulge in
Absolutely.
different
So
kinds of
we'll go
food.
into that detail. Coming to that topic, we will be touching a little bit about physical activity, a very important component for management of diabetes, how to maintain a healthy weight. Most important thing we will be touching upon is taking the prescribed medication and insulin dosages.
Right.
Very, 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 very important that you take all the prescribed medication and insulin dosages. Testing your blood sugar, again, a very important topic that many patients have identified even working in the diabetes team that I'm currently at, that the patients are not taking the time to test their blood sugar. So just to reinforce on that. And last but not the least, we need to have very regular visits to our family doctor for blood work. So any patient who's diabetic needs to do blood work every 3 months, which is a hemoglobin A1C, and every 6 months or once a year, the lipid profile is being tested. So again, a very important topic to be discussed. So these are some of the key principles that we'll be talking about as well. Sorry, we'll go back to the previous slides. So the main issues that we'll be discussing, which is very important for diabetes management, is avoiding smoking. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot detail into it. I think it becomes a very separate topic for discussion. The second thing is following a balanced meal plan, very important, being physically active, maintaining a healthy weight, and some of these other topics that we've already touched upon. Next slide. I'm trying to give everybody a little bit of a pictorial of how blood sugar is, why we need to eat carbohydrate-rich food, why energy is needed. So in this diagram, which is actually from the clinical practice guidelines of diabetes, it shows that much of the food that we eat converts into sugar, which is the glucose that converts, and the blood then takes the sugar to all parts of the body for energy. So when you have diabetes, the pancreas, which is an organ of your body, and there are cells called islets cells that make the hormone called insulin.
Okay.
So when the insulin is the hormone that carries the sugar from the blood to the rest of your body to give you the energy, and that's the energy that we feel energetic because we're eating all this food.
Right.
So what happens, it's very important to understand what happens when patients have diabetes, is that the pancreas is not producing enough insulin, or they have a lot of insulin resistance, and that could be due to being overweight, obesity, inactivity. There could be several factors. So that's why we need more medications or human insulin injections in order to serve the purpose better.
I see.
So what diabetes medication does is improve the insulin resistance. They improve the carrier so that whatever food that we eat, insulin is able to carry it and give it to you as energy. Right? So one of the factors that most patients feel when they first get diagnosed with diabetes is that they feel lack of energy. They lose immense amount of weight. And that is one of the reasons that we do, and that's one of the symptoms of high blood sugars, right? So if sitting at home during this COVID time, you've noticed that you have lack of energy, you've lost weight without even trying, you have no energy, please get your blood sugar checked. It could be a prime reason really for that. Okay? So moving on to some of the guidelines for healthy eating. Next slide. I'm sure everybody has heard this before, right? Like I'm sure as the diabetic patients, you've heard that the doctors, your dietitians, the nurses and diabetic team that you see, very important to eat 3 meals a day, right? Breakfast is very, very important, right? Just the way it's written, it's breaking the fast, very, very important. We recommend most of our patients to have their breakfast within 1 hour of waking up. Spacing the meals 4 to 6 hours apart, very important step. Delaying the meals is certainly recommended to avoid. However, if you do happen to delay the meals, which can happen, everybody is busy, you have work, you have school, definitely include a carbohydrate and a protein snack. And I know I'm using these words like carbohydrate, protein. We'll be going a little bit more into the details.
Yeah, because usually, people who have diabetes want to stay away from carbs.
Exactly, very good topic. So we will be reinforcing the role of carbohydrate, protein, and fat in the subsequent slides. So this is again a very pictorial way. This is again from the Diabetes Canada website. A good example of visualizing how to put your plate together. Right? So as you can see, so if you see in this plate, then half of a plate is filled with vegetables. So those are the non-starchy vegetables. These vegetables do not raise your blood sugars, right? Like salads, broccoli, green beans, cabbage. And then quarter of it is filled with starch, which is the starchy food, potato, rice, pasta, and the other quarter with the protein. So the whole idea of doing this is to include carbohydrate in each meal, okay? And on the separate side, you see a serving of a fruit, milk, or yogurt. Those are also, so fruit, milk, and yogurt, and all starchy food. These are the 3 carbohydrate sources, primarily from our food groups. So you should be including some carbohydrates in each meal. It doesn't have to be all starch. It doesn't have to be all fruits or milk. You can have a combination of it, but you need to have a combination of carbohydrates in each meal. Again, portion size is very, very, very important. And the next slide is
Neeta, before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to, ask you for the sake of people who do not eat non-veg, right? And for the protein, could you give some examples of what protein can be?
Absolutely. Actually, it is in the subsequent slide. Now that you asked something. So protein is, I know it's listed as the lean meat fish, but cheese is protein, lentils are protein, legumes are protein, green cheese, chickpeas, all those things can be. So the plant-based protein is what we're going to be talking about. So coming to the portion, again, this is a very simple hand-jive method of how to control your portion inside each meal. So when you're looking at carbohydrate sources, whether it is starch or it's fruit, thinking of your fist size, right? So this is a fist size, this is a medium size. So like a cup of rice would be a fist size, a cup of pasta, or a small medium apple. So when you don't have carbohydrate counting skills, you're just looking at hand-jive method. These are the ways to control your portions. When you're controlling the portions of protein, it's important to keep it to a palm size. not including the fingers.
Yeah.
And everybody has different palm sizes, I understand, but just the palm and the thickness of the little finger.
Okay, I have another question about that. When you say palm size, this is cooked rice or uncooked rice?
No, I'm talking about protein.
Okay, about protein.
Yes, so
Okay.
carbohydrate was only the fist size. When we are controlling the portion of protein, it is that. So on that plate, you have fist size of rice or starch and a palm size portion of the meat, which could be a cooked lentil as well.
Okay.
When it comes to vegetables, because they do not raise your blood sugar, and we will be going a little bit more into detail, general guidelines is to have 2 handfuls. But there's no harm in having more because they are high sources of fiber. It gives you a little bit of an idea of how to limit the fat, which for most people can be hard to understand because it is put in the cookie, but we like the tip of the tongue.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the next slide, a little bit more in detail. So as I talked about, that was just generalized healthy eating plans, but there are some very important guidelines for healthy cooking as well, right? So when you are cooking healthy food, you need to try methods which do not kill the nutrition in the food. So things like steaming, poaching, braising, boiling, stewing, roasting with liquids, making the cooked vegetables is good way. Eating smaller portions, fewer servings of the high fat and the protein food, very important. Especially with this barbecue season, I want to highlight, marinating the meats. You're marinating with acids or vinegar, so that you're increasing the flavor, but not and reducing the cooking time. If it's marinated, you're not spending too much time on the stove.
Yeah.
Using unsweetened, unsalted marinades more often. Barbecue cooking at a lower temperature so that you're not losing and burning food. Definitely avoiding overcooking food because you lose a lot of nutrition in it.
Right.
Choosing fruits and vegetables often, again, as a carbohydrate source, high fiber foods. The other point is planning meals beforehand. I'm sure most of the people who are working, it gets really hard. But if you're able to plan ahead of time, at least for the next few days, what you're going to be eating, does it have all the food groups? It actually helps in weight management and diabetes management. And again, as you talked about vegetable-based protein, there's always, a push on eating more vegetable-based protein like lentils, tofu.
Okay.
It's not that you can't have meat, fish, and protein, but try to have at least 2-3 times a week vegetable-based protein. We'll touch a little bit about what blood sugars are, right? Everybody, as a diabetic patient knows, we talk a lot about what is blood sugar. So blood sugar is basically the amount of sugar that we talked about earlier, which is in the blood at a given time. And why it's important to check your blood sugar? First, because then you know whether you have a high blood sugar or a low blood sugar. So these are the kind of discussions you should be having with your family doctor, with your diabetes nurse and educator and the dietitian team as to what your targets are. Every patient has individual targets. In general, a good blood sugar is between 4 to 7. Right?
Okay.
But if somebody has multiple health conditions, they are allowed to go a little bit higher. Right? For some it is 5 to 7. Anything below 4 sometimes can be a low blood sugar. Or below 5 can be a low blood sugar. So testing your blood sugar will help you determine whether you have a high blood sugar or you have a low blood sugar at a given time. Right. It also tells you the eating plan that you currently have, the exercise routine and the lifestyle that you currently have. Is it working well for you or not? Right? And how is it affecting your blood sugar? And last but not the least, testing blood sugar helps your diabetes healthcare team make the changes. So for example, you've been doing this for almost 2 years or 6 months, your A1C is still not coming down, that's one indicator. But if you don't test, you won't know what's going on a day-to-day basis.
I'm sorry, what is A1C?
So hemoglobin A1C is an indicator that tells you on an average how your blood sugar is for the last 3 months. Right? So when you are testing your blood sugar for a diabetic patient, A1C is tested every single time. So that sometimes after 3 months it comes as a surprise, right? Like you might have an A1C of 10 and above. That means your blood sugar is running in like 14, 15. But if you're testing on your own on a regular basis, it won't be a surprise. You'll be able to deal with it better. So hence, testing is critical. Okay?
And that can be done at home.
Absolutely. There are lots of tools which are available, and actually more so now. So as I said, the focus will be on the nutritional management of diabetes, so we will go back to that. So we did use the words like carbohydrate, protein, fat. Let's talk about some of the functions, right? So carbohydrates are sources that raise blood sugar. Everybody knows that. There are lots of people who try to avoid carbohydrates. We know it does raise your blood sugar. But at the same time, very important to know, it is an important source of energy. Most people don't know that our brain requires glucose to function. If you reduce your carbohydrate intake drastically, you're not getting the efficient source of energy, which the brain requires. Brain efficiently uses glucose as a source of energy. So very important to have carbohydrate in meal. It's about the portions and the frequency, and that's where you're going to have a good discussion with your dietitian team. Right? Protein and fat, on the other hand, does not raise your blood sugar. Right? Doesn't mean you could have excessive amounts of it, right? Protein is essential for body tissue, muscle repair. Fat is essential for lipid management, cholesterol, weight control, right? So we'll go again, as I said, the focus is on carbohydrate. In the next slide, we'll go into what is carbohydrate, what is one choice. Okay? So this is going a little bit in more detail of diabetes management. So what is one carbohydrate choice? One carbohydrate choice is roughly 15 grams of carbohydrate. I know I'm just throwing in numbers in there, but think of it as equal to 3 teaspoons of sugar, right? So 15 grams of carbohydrate in a layman's language is equal to 3 teaspoons of sugar, right? So for example, so if you eat a slice of bread, you're roughly converting into 3 teaspoons of sugar into your body. If you're having a medium apple, which is again a fruit, a carbohydrate, or a cup of milk, you're converting into 15 grams of carbohydrate. Again, I'm throwing this number. Remember, I'm going to put it into perspective to see how much of carbohydrate.
Yeah, because it sounds very alarming. 3 spoons of sugar in one go.
But that's what it converts into. You're not sitting down and having 3 spoons of sugar. But basically, when you're having a slice of bread or a cup of milk or a fruit, you are technically having sugar equivalent to 3 teaspoons of sugar.
But the point is, it is important for the body.
It is important, and how much would be in the next slide. So this is again a very generalized criteria for the amount of carbohydrate that men and women have separate requirements, again due to their muscle distribution, their metabolism. So for men, each meal requires roughly around 4 to 5 grams of carbohydrate. So if one is 15, it comes to 60 to 75 grams. And for women, 3 to 4 carbohydrate choices. And for snack, you need 0 to 2, roughly. It can be. So again, this is very general. When you see your dietitian teams at the Diabetes Education Center, they'll be able to modify this based on your weight loss goals. If you're wanting to lose weight for a man or a woman, you wouldn't be on 4 carbohydrate choices. You would probably be on 2 to 3. But this is just in general. So everybody, you don't have to start eating 75 grams of carbohydrate just because I'm saying this in the workshop. Make sure that you talk to your nutritional care team and your dietitian to understand, but it's very important to understand that carbohydrate is important, right? So we'll go a little bit more into, everybody asking, oh, you tell me I'm going to have 3 carbohydrate choices. What does it look like? So as I mentioned before, a slice of bread, a fruit, and a glass of milk is a carbohydrate, right? So 3 carbohydrate choices doesn't have to be 3 slices of bread. What dietitians and clinical practice guidelines for Diabetes Canada recommend is to have carbohydrates from all these sources. Right? Don't just stick to the starchy food, because the more starch you eat, more calories you consume. You want to be able to balance it. And fruits contain different amount of calories. Milk and yogurt contain different amount of calories. And they have different nutrients that a bread will not provide. For example, milk will provide calcium, vitamin D, which bread would not be able to provide. So that's why if you're looking at a 3-carb choice for a breakfast, 2 slices of bread plus a cup of fruit instead of the 3 slices of bread or maybe a cup and a half of cereal. Another option would be a slice of bread, 3 quarter cup of high fiber cereal, specifically, and a cup of milk.
Yeah.
Right? Third example, you can have if it's a large bagel. Remember, bagels are dense. So, half a bagel can be sometimes equal to 2 slices of bread. So half a bagel with a small banana will equivalent to 3 carb choices. One thing which is not listed in here is definitely I want to highlight, and I would be talking about it in the separate slide, is about adding protein, right? Because I was focusing only on carbohydrate, that's all it was listed, but very important to add protein in the meal, right? Going back to the next slide, another example of what our carbohydrate choice would look like. As you can see, it could be a cooked pasta with, when it says diet yogurt, I would say artificially sweetened yogurt and 15 grams. So serving of a fruit, right? I think in the next slide, I'm going a little bit more again what 5 carbohydrate choices would look like. This would apply more so for patients who are underweight and they're wanting to gain weight, which rarely happens actually in type 2 diabetes, but then we do see a lot of type 1 diabetes patients, who might have a higher requirement, or they might be more physically active. That's where their requirements goes up. So that's why I've given an example of that. So moving to, talking about carbohydrate, what about vegetables? What is vegetables? All vegetables are healthy, they're low in fat, they're low in sugar, they're not a source of carbohydrate except for the starchy vegetables, like potato and corn, right? All vegetables are excellent sources of vitamins, minerals, and most importantly, fiber. Right? Fiber is something that keeps you full, so that you're not looking for snacking all over again right after the meal. Again, these are guidelines that apply to Canada Food Guide as well. Choosing bright colored vegetables. Different colored vegetables give you different antioxidants. They give you a variety of vitamins and minerals and different kinds. Like B vitamins is different in a green vegetable or in an orange vegetable. So very important to choose those.
To have varied colors.
Exactly. So including a variety of cooked vegetable and salad with meals. So what we recommend for diabetic patient is to have cooked or raw or steamed, whichever way vegetable, but have it with 2 meals at least.
Vegetables.
Right. So if you want to include it with breakfast, great. You can put it in your eggs, or if you want to make sure you have it in your lunch and dinner consistently. So that's great.
Neeta, I just want to point out one thing. Just because our webinar is, will be seen by many, the community dominant here is our South Asian community. And the way we do cooking is where it's a lot of heat and things like that. And in one of your previous slides, you did mention that high heat cooking is not advisable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I recommend most of my patients is, don't fry things. Try to cook with the cover on and let the nutrients, be in there. Yeah. So don't overcook your vegetables. Is what I say. And definitely salads is something which is a very North American thing. I understand it's not a South Asian thing, but it's not. It is actually a lot of patients have it.
It's actually a good variety to have it with our cooked meal, hot salad.
And then sometimes we tend to eat like rice and dal, right? A rice and a bowl of lentil. Very typical example is kidney beans with rice. A very typical Sunday kind of lunch, right? So if you add a bowl of cut vegetable, lettuce, cucumber, tomato, carrots, that's one way of adding vegetables. So then you wouldn't be splurging on those, right? So now we touch upon protein, meat, and alternatives. Again, I'm going a little bit more into the portions of it, but we don't normally count those. But it's good to understand how much meat do we need, what alternatives do we need in each meal. So, for example, an ounce of cheese, which is a small cube, 1 egg, half a cup of cooked legumes, so it could be chickpeas, kidney beans, any kind. 2 tablespoons of peanut butter or cream cheese, or even nuts. I think nuts is not written in there, but nuts can be a good source of protein. However, very important to keep the portion in control. So protein does not raise your blood sugar, but if you have excessive amounts of it, you could be gaining weight. and gaining weight will make you more insulin resistant. Right? Obesity is one of the reasons for type 2 diabetes. So very important to keep an eye on the portion sizes. So going into fats and oils, again, using, this is again per meal that you could be including. So if you have a teaspoon of butter, oil, salad dressing, mayonnaise, making heart healthy food choices. Again, this is an extensive topic, and I think we need a very separate webinar on talking about healthy fat choices. What are the options? I think it's going to be very interesting. We can certainly consider that in future, but definitely gives you a little bit of a snippet of what to do. Right? A lot of patients ask questions on, when I go to the grocery store, I get really confused, right? Food labels can be very, very confusing, right? Because you're moving from one aisle to another, there's so many brands.
Yeah.
So I do want to focus a little bit on how to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll go back to the previous slide, please. So when we look at a food label, these are the 4 different areas we'll be covering, right? So there is always an ingredient list.
Sure.
What's in it. Very important to look. A lot of people look for it for allergies too.
Yeah.
Then there is a nutrition fact table, which is on the right hand side of the label.
Okay.
Then some products have claims that it's low sugar, high in fiber, so we'll touch a little bit about it. And under nutrition fact on the right hand side is a percentage dairy fat. So we'll go a little bit more into what to look for that. Okay. So when we're looking at carbohydrate on a label, as you can see on the right hand side, first and foremost thing to look at is the serving size, which is highlighted, which is in the red highlighter.
Right.
So for example, in this label it says 2 slices. So if you go to another brand of bread, it might say 1 slice. If you go to a brand of crackers, one might say 10 crackers, one might say 20. So whatever is written above is the information down below. So if you are a person who likes to eat 4 slices of bread, you will have to do some double. Right? So the amount of carbohydrate in the food is listed on the nutrition fact table, and the serving sizes is what you need to define, whether you're going to be eating less of that food, more of that food, and that's what helps you figure out how much carbohydrate you have. So when you go down the nutrition fact table, you will go into carbohydrates, which is in this case says 36 grams. There is fiber listed and there is sugar listed.
Right.
So carbohydrate is actually a composition of 3 different aspects.
Okay.
Starch, fiber, and sugar. As you can see, fiber and sugar are listed, but starch is not listed. That means it's part of the carbohydrate. So that 36 grams that you see in there is actually does include. So out of that 36 grams, 6 grams is fiber, 3 grams is sugar, and the rest which is left is starch. So you're supposed to have 15 grams. 15 grams is 1 serving, and you can easily do 45 grams, but from the bread you need only 30, right? So those are the kind of maths. So fiber does not raise your blood sugar, so that's why it's always recommended to be subtracted. So that's the reason dietitians recommend high fiber foods. Because even if you pick up a label and it has 45 grams, but if it's 10 grams of fiber, immediately you deduct it 10 grams. So you're only getting 35 grams of net carbohydrate. Right? So choosing high fiber food is one of the reasons to do that. So as I said, in this case, 36 grams of carbohydrate minus the 6 grams of fiber. So net grams of carbohydrate in that meal, all in the 2 slices of bread in this case is 30 grams. Right? Yeah. Right? So let's practice that a little bit. Okay. I think it's very important. Right? Okay. So you look at the serving sizes, you look at the total amount of carbohydrate, subtract the fiber. That's what you get. The serving size, very critical. Okay.
The fiber is our friend here.
Fiber is definitely our friend here. Absolutely. And we'll go into the details of what are some of the roles of fiber, functions of fiber. Okay. So the serving size on the label may not be the serving size that you plan to eat. I'll give you a very quick example. You go to the grocery store, you find puddings there, and you immediately go to the carbohydrate and the sugar. but you don't realize on the serving size it says quarter cup of pudding. I'm sure if you pick up a pudding box, you're not going to eat a quarter cup. You're likely to eat the whole thing, right? So those are some of the ways, manufacturers can, I don't want to use the word fool, but it is actually a way to trick you into getting those, right? Like, oh, it's a low sugar thing, but you didn't realize you had a whole cup, not a quarter cup. So very important to realize, would you be eating less of this, the same amount, or the more, in order to analyze how much carbohydrate you can get from that food, right? So moving on, so ingredients, as I said, very important aspects of food label. Most of the ingredients that are listed on the label are listed by weight from most to the least, right? So if it's the first 3 ingredients, it helps you decide whether it's a food healthy for me. So in the first 3 ingredients, if you see sugar, definitely a red flag. Not that you cannot have it completely ever in your life, but it's a red flag. You don't want to choose that every week. Right? So for example, in the next slide, we have just randomly picked a special case cereal. As you can see, it is whole wheat, but sugar being the second ingredient. So, and it's listed from the most, right? So that's another way. So if you notice sugar being in the ingredient list in the 4th and the 5th, probably a better choice. Okay, right. Moving on to we have daily values. So that's the percentage. If you remember on that label that we discussed, there is a column for a percentage. That's also a very important way to look at it. So the daily value is found on the right hand side under the nutrition chapter, and it actually helps you compare food, right? It helps you understand whether it has higher percentage of one thing and a lower percentage of another thing, from one product to another product, right? And it helps you do less math. So for example, if you're not carbohydrate counting, you're just, you're not a diabetic patient, you're just looking for healthy eating, look at the percentage daily value and look for things which are good for you. Fiber is good for you, right? Protein is good for you. So look for higher percentage value of those. Saturated fat, sodium, all that should be lower percentage. So the next slide actually just gives you an example. So you can use percentage daily value to choose products that are higher in nutrients. So the example, they give an example if you're looking for high calcium, iron, vitamin, fiber, but definitely looking for foods which are lower in sodium and saturated in trans fat. That's right. Last,
usually those are the yummier,
the tastier ones. Absolutely. Yeah, there are some compromises in the taste that diabetic patients have to do, but I will go into the next slide right away. This is talking about the claims, right? Food manufacturers put a lot of claims out on the food product. If it says free of, that means it has less than 0.5 grams of sugar. I know sometimes it can be confusing. When it says no added, it means there is no added sugar. But for example, if you're buying a can of juice, there is no added sugar in it. But think of it, it does contain fruit. Fruit is a carbohydrate. So to take out a cup of juice, it at least has 5 to 10 servings of fruit. Would you sit down and eat 5 to 10 servings of fruit? Probably not, right? So that's another way of looking at it. You'd rather sit down and have 2 servings of fruit than having a cup of juice. Try taking out the orange juice, fresh orange juice. You need a lot of orange juice, right? So when it says no added, means it doesn't have added sugar in it. Doesn't mean it's free of sugar. It already contains carbohydrate from the fruit that the juice came from, right? When it says low fat, that's another way. That means it has 3 grams of fat or less, and preferably free of saturated and trans fat. When it says reduced calories, again 25% less. Another way, those are not bad ways, but it's good to know as a consumer what it means. Right? When it says light, it must say describe, for example, like cheese. Very important. And that's where you will see the percentage value, the daily value difference when it says light. Light applies in cheese mostly. And if it's a source, right? If it's a source of, for example, source of fiber, source of calcium, that means it contains an added and a higher grams per day. So some of these claims come in very, very useful, but it's very important to know what it means.
What it means.
What it means.
Completely understand, and especially for our communities who English is not a first language, for them to further understand the meaning behind it is a challenge.
Very, very important.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So in summary, I'm just summarizing, I think we did a good practice on how to read the label, very critical thing. So you look at the serving size, look for the carbohydrates, subtract the fiber. That's how you know how much starch in it. Just add the sugar and the starch, and then you know how much of that particular food product based on how much you're allowed per meal you could have, right? So that kind of summarizes our carbohydrate. I focused a lot on it because for diabetics it's important. But we don't want to neglect important other food groups. For example, the next slide is about fiber. Right? We did a brief discussion on it. There are two kinds of fiber. There is soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So on an everyday basis, the fiber that we eat, which is in whole grains, whole wheat, fruits, vegetable, is a source of insoluble fiber. It helps you, being not constipated, keeps your bowels regular. However, the soluble fiber is also in the similar kind of food groups, but it also has another function. It helps reduce your blood cholesterol. So if your low density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is called the bad cholesterol, layman's standard, is high, patients are recommended to increase their soluble fiber. They still keep their insoluble fiber intake high, but keep the soluble intake high. And this helps you slow down the digestion, so you feel full. And that is actually in South Asians, we have an added advantage. We are so much of legumes eater. We eat lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, at least 3-4 times a week.
And we
more. Absolutely. So legumes are actually considered a very good source of soluble fiber. So if you're including that, oat bran, barley, I'm sure we've seen our ancestors our grandparents eating that, and some fruits and vegetables. So if you have on top of diabetes, if you also have issues with high cholesterol levels, important to have a balance of soluble and insoluble fiber. The most important thing I want to highlight is most patients try to increase their fiber intake. But fiber, remember, if you keep increasing the fiber intake and you don't eat enough, if you don't drink enough fluids, it causes opposite effect. It causes you to be even more constipated. So very critical. Whenever I'm doing education in my sessions with my patients, I tell them, as you increase your fiber, please increase your water intake, right? If you increase your fiber intake and you start including high fiber foods and don't have enough fluids in your body, the bowel movements would be impacted and you would be like, what did I do to myself, right? So very critical, which I wanted to highlight on. So now we are coming on the protein. Again, as I said, protein is very important in your muscle repair for body health. And the first point is actually on the plant-based protein, right? There is a whole discussion on it. Fish, seafood, chicken, poultry, egg, low-fat dairy, beans, nuts. So very important to have protein in each meal. And preferably in snacks as well. So if you're having fruit, you can have it with farced almonds, you can have it with a piece of cheese, choosing Greek yogurt over regular yogurt because it already has an added protein, so it gives you carbohydrate and protein. So Greek yogurt is a preferred snack for diabetics. Having cheese and crackers together, having a glass of milk with 5-6 almonds. Again, smaller amounts. Remember, proteins add calories as well, right? The other important macronutrient in the next slide is fat. So it is an important nutrient. Absolutely, we can't really negate that. It is a source of energy when we eat fat in our meals. When we eat a very low fat meal, obviously we feel hungry. So it does give you that satisfaction. Definitely, as you said, it adds taste, texture, and makes you feel full longer. And at the same time, we can't just take away fat.
Yeah.
Right? We need healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, because it also is essential to absorb some fat soluble vitamins. Otherwise, you'll be deficient.
So what you're saying is that all these food groups are important. It's just all about what kind of choices we are making.
Exactly, and the portions that we make.
Portions.
Exactly. Right. So, when you have diabetes, I don't want to, miss upon an important thing, because sometimes hypertension, which is high salt, can come along with when you have diabetes. So, some of the things that I want to touch upon about salt in a healthy diet is salt is a salt is a salt. I have lots of patients who ask me questions. Oh, I've changed it from, regular salt to pink salt and Himalayan salt and different kind of salt. But remember, at the end of the day, they're all sodium chloride. They are all salt. Not saying that it's not important, but what kind of salt you're having and is okay, but the amount that you're having. It is an important mineral, which is necessary for life. It does help maintain your blood pressure if you have a very low sodium. You could have hypotension, which is low blood pressure. It is important for fluid balance, nerve and muscle function. But remember, if you have been diagnosed being hypertensive or high blood pressure, you're on medication, very important to limit your salt intake. It's not completely. It's only up to the stage when patients are on dialysis, they are on no added salt. But an average person who has diabetes and hypertension, they just need to manage their sodium.
Right.
So let's give an example of a typical South Asian meal, right? We tend to clear everything with salt. So a little bit in cooking is absolutely okay. It's the extra that we put on the salad, on the yogurt. Those are the kind of things you want to be careful of. Use alternative herbs, peppers, different kind of herbs. You can use lemon is a great way of giving flavor to your food and not increasing the sodium.
What is the minimum sodium intake that we should have per day?
Good question. So if you look at the hypertensive, for an average person, I think it is like. Actually, I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the number. Absolutely, I can certainly look into that and post on the link. I don't want to quote a number, which is enough. Right?
Thank you.
So next slide is on eating away from home. Let's be honest. We all want to eat healthy food, but we are all busy at the end of the day. We do end up eating away from home or doing takeouts or restaurants. So what are the key points you should be looking at? Again, portion control. It's not that there is no forbidden food. As you can see, the fourth point is forbidden. There is no forbidden food. Yes, you can have a little bit of sugar. In fact, in the guidelines, they recommend if 10% of your total daily calories can come from simple sugar. So if you have a little bit of sugar in your tea, coffee, but not having excessive amounts of any other simple sugars, that is all right. Actually, dietitian would agree with that. But very important to have portion control, label reading, checking the website. So for example, if you're visiting a restaurant, you can check the website to see. Health Canada has a mandate. Every restaurant and fast food have to give you an information of what's in the food, how much carbohydrate, calories especially. Look for the information. If you can't find it, ask. Assess what you're going to have. Healthy snacks, very important. Eating at regular time, not skipping meals, and again, deciding which restaurant will work for you. Even if you're, all of a sudden ended up in a restaurant, you can remember that plate in mind. Right? If you fill up half of your plate with vegetable, a quarter with starch, and a quarter with protein, you can't go wrong with that portion size.
Portion sizes and the choices.
Exactly. So if, occasionally if you're splurging, absolutely fine. You don't want to do it every week. You don't want to do it every time, right? So towards the end of in the next slide, I've actually added some of the financial resources that are available for patients in diabetes. I wouldn't be able to go a lot into the detail, it's more of a social worker area, but there's disability tax credit, and actually for the For the attendees, I have the links, so you can click on those links and find out, have the discussion with your family doctor or your nurses and diabetes education team.
Right.
There is child disability benefit, there is Ontario non-clinical health, so there's lots of funding by the government of Ontario. There is Trillium Drug Plan, there is Diabetes Canada financial assistance. So for example, if you are a person who has a child who's type 1 diabetic, then we've got a financial assistance program.
I think those are very, very helpful links.
Perfect, I'm glad. So that puts us to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for your time, and now we'll open the session for question and answer.
You know what, Neeta, before we start the question and answer, I had a question. I wanted to tell you my inclination towards the proteins that you were talking about, having Greek yogurt and things like those. And I was just thinking, like, is it just good for people who are suffering from diabetes or normal healthy persons?
Absolutely, yeah. Actually, diabetes management principles do not just apply to diabetes management principles. If somebody who's healthy doesn't have diabetes, or maybe they're at the risk of diabetes, if they follow the diabetes management principles, the chances are that they would be they will benefit from it. So it is basically healthy eating. It's no different.
That's it. I agree with you, because mostly in our families, we have history of diabetes, of somebody in the family, and that does put us at that risk factor. And following such guidelines is definitely helpful. Okay, so we have no questions so far from our
one question. I'm sorry, I think we're getting a problem.
Okay, one question. Awesome. It's just because you've explained everything so well.
Oh, that's
I don't think anybody's left with any more questions now. But
I'm glad.
2 questions.
Exactly. Good question. Okay, there we go. So hopefully you get some of the screen pretty soon, and we'll be able to address those.
And the links that you have shared, we will definitely share it with all of our participants after the webinar. We'll put it on the links, because those are going to be definitely very helpful for our.
And as you get more information on it, you can print those and ask your family doctor to give you more information, or you can take that information to your diabetes education center.
Actually, that is another thing I wanted to ask you. Diabetes education center, not a very familiar term that I have heard before.
Oh, is that right? Okay, absolutely. So actually, I wanted to put a link for all the Ontario Diabetes Education Center. I probably might have missed it. But diabetes education centers are all over Ontario, and most of them are self-referrals. Most people don't know that. Self-referrals, so you can just Google it, look for that information, look for the phone number, call them. They have a form. You can go there, fill it out. You'll get to see a nurse and a dietitian. Right away.
So we can find online, which is the nearest center.
Exactly.
And we can go
based on the address. There are numerous amounts.
How about language support? Do we?
Absolutely. Great questions. Yes. So there are these diabetes education centers are mostly part of the hospital, but they are sometimes in the outreach. Like for example, where I work, I have a Punjabi speaking nurse, a Punjabi speaking dietitian, including myself. So and the handouts that we have are also in different languages. So if you go to diabetes.ca, that's another link that we can have about diabetes.ca, where you can actually see all the handouts, and they have culture specific in different languages.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
So
A question from Pooja Kamar, and she's asking, I was told that I have fatty liver. So do you think taking some more protein affects the fatty liver?
I think that's a great question. Fatty liver is something that you will have to discuss that further with your physician. But absolutely, if you're having excessive amount of plant protein, it will impact the fatty liver. But you definitely have to keep everything in portion control.
I think, as you said before, that we need to be mindful of what other predisposed conditions we are at, and then based on that,
right? Absolutely.
Okay. So Pooja, I think you probably got answer to your question that you need to visit your physician to further discuss on this about how protein will affect. But what we were discussing here is that we need to have a balanced diet, and so protein was discussed in that context. Our next question is from Vasam. And he's asking, what is the ketone?
What is ketone? Okay, excellent question. So ketones are basically, an important discussion that we always have with our type 1 diabetic patients.
Okay.
I know I haven't gone into the detail of what different kind of diabetes we have. We have type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, which is very common.
Right.
Actually, type 1 is common too, but type 2, there is gestational diabetes. And then there is LADA, which is called latent autoimmune disease, right? Which is also kind of subset of type 1 diabetes. So when patients who have type 1 diabetes, their bodies are not producing insulin at all, right? And most of those type 1 patients are young kids. You could be getting it at an age of 2 and above. Really? Yes. So in our pediatric clinic, there are patients who come as young as 2 years old, right? So in those patients, sometimes what happens is high blood sugar causes your body to utilize protein and fat as nutrients, and that's what causes the ketones. So ketones are important things to check, not so much for the type 2 diabetes, but definitely important for type 1 diabetic patients. They should know how to check ketones, especially if they have an excessively high blood sugar.
Okay.
I think we have more questions.
Yeah, actually, Pooja has come back with another query, and she's asking, is it good to consume milk in the night before the bed? Many people are in that habit. I know in my household, a lot of family members like to have, especially my older, members in the household, they like to have milk in the night. But it's a good question. Is it good to have it in the night?
I don't see a problem, but if you're a diabetic, milk, remember, is a source of carbohydrate. So if you add 5-6 almonds to it, or a source of protein, I don't see the reason why not.
Yeah.
But definitely check your blood sugar. If your morning blood sugars are high and you have enough amount throughout the day, you may not. We always encourage our patients to limit and eat the right amount instead of giving you more insulin. Right? We don't want to force the patients to eat just because you're taking insulin. So I think I need a little bit more information to answer that.
Yeah. So Neeta, there's another viewer of ours, Anjana Thom. She's asking, how do we get hold of Neeta?
Okay. So definitely, please send. I am associated with Krish Hope Services, and I think the website information was given by Santa, and we'll give it again. So any questions that you have for myself, please email Krish Hope Services, and I'll be happy to answer that.
All right, and that pretty much brings us to the end of today's webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us, connecting with us on this webinar. We will be today, surely you learned a lot of information about nutritional management of diabetes, and to carry forward with the webinar series that we are doing till the end of October, actually in November. The next one coming up is on 1st of October, which is a Thursday, again from 7 to 8 p.m. And the topic would be auditory processing disorder and its implications on children during COVID. It is a very niche topic, and I'm sure many of you will benefit from by attending this webinar. And the presenter would be Lalsa Perepa. So please do join us next week once again. Go on Eventbrite, register for the session. Let your family, friends, and other people know about these web series, so that along with you, many other people can benefit from them. So thank you, and thank you so much, Neeta, for coming out today and speaking to our viewers. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.